The battle for Donbas, War of Attrition. The war did not end when Russian forces withdrew from Kiev. It changed. The front line shifted east. The focus narrowed. Donbas became the center of gravity. For Russia, the objective was direct: expand and consolidate control over the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. For Ukraine, the mission was equally clear: slow the advance, preserve combat strength, and prevent a strategic breakthrough. What followed was not a single battle. It was a grinding campaign made up of overlapping offensives, sieges, river crossings, artillery duels, and precision strikes. This phase of the war would be defined by attrition. Izium became one of the first key positions in the Eastern Campaign. After intense fighting, Russian forces captured the city and turned it into a logistical hub. From Izium, they attempted to push south toward Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. The capture provided a staging ground and marked a tactical gain. But advances from that axis slowed under sustained Ukrainian resistance. Control of territory remained contested, and the front lines did not collapse as some had predicted. Further south, the battle for Popasna unfolded. Repeated assaults were launched. After prolonged fighting, Russian and Allied forces captured the city. Its fall opened routes toward Bakhmut and other Ukrainian defensive lines. However, each advance required heavy artillery preparation and came at measurable cost. The campaign was not rapid. It was deliberate and destructive. One of the most intense urban battles occurred in Severodonetsk. The city became a symbol of resistance and firepower. Russian forces relied heavily on artillery to weaken defensive positions. Entire districts were reduced to rubble. Ukrainian forces held industrial zones, including the Azot chemical plant, for weeks. Street-to-street fighting continued under constant shelling. Eventually, Ukrainian commanders ordered a withdrawal to avoid encirclement. Russia secured control of Severodonetsk. It was a clear territorial gain. But the city itself was largely destroyed. Across the Siversky Donets River lay Lysychansk. Positioned on higher ground, it offered defensive advantages. Ukrainian forces held their lines under intense bombardment. Russian troops gradually advanced, pressuring supply routes. To prevent encirclement and preserve forces, Ukraine conducted another organized withdrawal. With the capture of Lysychansk, Russia declared full control of the Luhansk region. This was one of Moscow's most significant achievements of the Eastern Campaign. Yet the offensive had consumed time, manpower, and large quantities of ammunition. Momentum came at a price. Elsewhere, attempts to cross the Siversky Donets River illustrated the risks of maneuver warfare. During one river crossing operation, Ukrainian artillery targeted pontoon bridges and armored units. Several vehicles were destroyed. The episode demonstrated the vulnerability of concentrated forces under modern surveillance and precision fire. It was considered a notable setback for Russian advancing units in that sector. The battle for Bakhmut began to intensify during this phase. Russian forces pushed westward from captured positions. Ukraine fortified defensive lines around the city. Artillery exchanges became frequent. Casualties mounted on both sides. Bakhmut would later become one of the longest and most brutal battles of the war, but its early stages were rooted in this Donbas offensive. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk remained key Ukrainian strongholds. Though not captured during this phase, they were subjected to missile and artillery strikes. These cities represented logistical and administrative centers for Ukrainian operations in the east. Control of them would have significantly altered the strategic picture. But they held. As the ground campaign unfolded, another shift occurred. Ukraine began deploying Western-supplied long-range precision systems. These weapons targeted ammunition depots, command posts, and logistics hubs behind Russian lines. Unlike mass artillery barrages, these strikes were selective. Supply chains were disrupted. Stockpiles were destroyed. Operational tempo slowed in certain sectors. While territorial control in Donbas did not immediately reverse, the dynamic of the battlefield began to evolve. Logistics, not just firepower, became decisive. The Donbas campaign revealed the character of this stage of the war. It was no longer about rapid breakthroughs. It was about endurance. Russia achieved measurable territorial gains, particularly in Luhansk region. Ukraine conducted strategic withdrawals, preserving combat units for future operations. Both sides sustained significant casualties. Both expended vast amounts of ammunition and equipment. Both adapted tactics as the environment changed. Civilian infrastructure suffered heavily. Industrial zones were shattered. Power grids were damaged. Large numbers of residents evacuated. Others remained in contested areas under difficult conditions. By midsummer, front lines began to stabilize. Russia had expanded control in parts of the east. Ukraine had maintained cohesion and combat capability. Neither side secured a decisive strategic victory. The battle for Donbas did not end the war. It transformed it. It showed that modern large-scale warfare in Europe could still revolve around artillery, logistics, and incremental advances. It demonstrated that territorial gains do not automatically resolve a conflict. And it confirmed that both Russia and Ukraine were preparing not for a short campaign, but for a prolonged struggle. In Donbas, speed gave way to endurance. Shock gave way to pressure. And the war entered a new phase. One measured not only by kilometers gained, but by how long each side could sustain the fight. The next chapter was already approaching, and the balance was far from settled.